Hi guys, I hope you're doing well. I hope you're having a very nice day or evening or whatever part of the day this is. Thank you so much about your kind comments about my previous video, even if only in private in Discord. It means the world to me. It means that, that I haven't wasted my time pretty much. But there was actually one comment, a single comment on YouTube, which you can see right now. It is from a friend, granted, I know it's not from some random person on the internet, but someone who I am friends with. But I think this comment actually opened a huge can of worms. Before I can answer the question, the comment, I actually have to talk about motivation itself, what it is. Well, basically motivation is something that drives us to do stuff. That's it. That's the simplest definition I can get. But it is a little bit more complex. So, let's say we all eat. Most of us eat at least. Let's say we're eating dinner. I may eat dinner because I'm hungry. So I'm doing that to fulfill a very basic need, something that comes from within me. My body tells me that it's hungry, it needs nutrients, so I should eat something, and so I do. But at the same time, someone might say, you won't have this piece of cake until you have your dinner. Now, this, I'm still motivated, right? This is still something that makes me eat my dinner. But this time it doesn't come from within, it comes from someone else. Someone is telling me that if I don't do something, I won't get a reward, which is a delicious piece of cake. So this example shows a difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Basically, intrinsic means from inside. When it comes from us personally, from our needs, it will be intrinsic, but when it comes from the outside world, from other people, it would be extrinsic. Now, let's go back to motivation and learning. So, intrinsic motivation is basically like when you get sucked up into the black hole of Wikipedia. Do you know what I mean? You start with some article because, some term popped up or some article popped up. You start reading about black holes, and then you suddenly read about superclusters and the great attractor and everything, and you are driven by your pure curiosity. You're just curious, you want to learn more. It's just so interesting that you can't stop, and you are actually learning something effectively. So this would be a perfect example of intrinsic motivation. You drive yourself. Your inner need to read more and to get more knowledge drives you to read more and gain even more knowledge. Now, what would extrinsic motivation mean in the context of teaching and learning? Basically, when you have a reward or a punishment for learning, for achieving some learning effects, pretty much. So it might be a good grade or a bad grade. It might be, when your parents tell you to study to get something, or not to be punished, pretty much, not to be grounded or something like that. So this would be extrinsic motivation. It doesn't come from you. It is something you do because others make you do it. It might get a little bit muddy and complicated when we talk about stuff like, I need to study this much and to learn this much to get to the university, because it kind of is both. It's a mix because you want to do that, but at the same time you know that if you don't, there will be punishment, and if you do, there might be a reward. So I'm not going to talk about that. So given that we have those two different types of motivation, it's quite clear that it's most easy for teachers to utilize extrinsic motivation. Basically, what we can do is, well, we pretty much can just tell our students that if you don't study enough, you won't get good grades. If you don't get good grades, or you just fail, you won't be able to continue studying, or you will have to pay or do stuff. It's, It's just completely extrinsic. It's completely independent from the students, and it's an easy way out, to be honest. But it doesn't mean that we can't access or influence our students' intrinsic motivation, so their own urge to study. And I have a couple of ideas that I use typically with my students, but before I tell you what those are, I need to put a huge disclaimer here. University students are adults. It's much more difficult to influence adults' motivation, especially intrinsic motivation. That's one thing. And the other thing is that while children, or like high schoolers, preschoolers, they need to be there. It's obligatory for them to study and to be at school, to be students. University students have chosen to study something. And that makes such a huge difference because, for once, you kind of expect them to be interested, at least somewhat interested, in what they're learning. And the other thing is, if they don't, no one is going to keep them there. No one's going to hold their hand and say, oh, but you have to do it, think about your future. I mean, I try to sometimes, but it's their own choice and it's their own life, and they need to be responsible for their own actions effectively. So, it's hard to find the balance, but this is what it is. We are dealing with adults who have chosen to do this. It's not obligatory, it's completely like optional thing in their lives. So, it's a question of how much I should care about motivating them. I still care. I hope I will in the future. But there are times when I'm like, it's not going to work. This person is just so uninterested in what they're studying. I think they should actually think about their future and if this is the correct career path for them. But that's it for the disclaimer. Right now I'm going to move on to actual things I think are beneficial and that I sometimes do. Number 1, be passionate. This is something that I have found to be one of the most effective things when it comes to motivating students. When I show them that I am extremely into what I'm teaching, that I love it, it interests me, it shows them that this is actually something interesting. It doesn't work on everyone, those are not foolproof techniques or approaches, but it's completely subjective. However, I find it the best thing. I'm just being myself, geeking out over what I am teaching my students, and I have really noticed that it makes such a huge difference. And also in the context of the previous video, this is something that makes them ask more questions, because they know they can expect some answers, and they know that if I may not know an answer, because it does happen, I am not a dictionary, I'm not an encyclopedia, but they know that if I don't know the answer, I will seek it out because I am so into it. So yeah, be passionate, show them that you're passionate about this, don't be a robot, and they will love or at least appreciate what you're teaching. Number 2, digress. I've noticed that students get even more interested in the classes I'm teaching when I go on a little tangent from time to time. Well, it happens more often than I would like, to be honest, okay? Just don't judge me. But what I do, I very often just insert some other linguistic trivia for them, like something about pronunciation, something about etymology of words, something that is just interesting. I won't test them on that. This will not appear on the exam, but I just find it so fun and interesting and suitable for the topic that I'm actually covering, that I can't resist myself, and I digress, and we have so much fun. Actually, you know, what happens very often is that some students have some other trivia, some other linguistic facts, and we have like a 5 to 10 minute discussion about something a little bit unrelated to the topic, but it's very engaging, and we're having so much fun that this whole learning process stops being something dry and boring and very methodical. You know what I mean? Number 3, show the use. No one really likes learning stuff for the sake of learning. That's a fact. That's something that we all know, that we all feel about how we actually acquire new information. The more useful something is to us, the more we are going to be willing to, so intrinsically motivated, to actually spend some time to investigate or to learn it, to try to understand a certain matter. When I teach my students, I do one of the two things. Sometimes both of them at the same time, sometimes only one of them. So I basically either ask them, how do you think it would apply to your job as a teacher? And the other thing is that I just simply show them how it's going to be useful to them when they are in front of a classroom teaching a foreign language. What I have found is that when I explain things, or when we have this brainstorming session, they, some of them are actually nodding. It shows that they start thinking about the purpose of what I'm teaching them, instead of just, you know, absorbing this knowledge or forcing themselves to learn. When you show someone that what you're teaching or what they're learning is useful, or is going to be useful in their life, they are going to put a lot of more effort because they find it beneficial, simply. And the last part, or the last question in the comment, was basically how to cope with, you know, those students who are not willing to study, who are not motivated. And well, sometimes you just have to accept the fact that not everyone is going to be interested in what you're teaching, and some of the students are not generally interested in what they're learning. At you know, not only your class or your course, but in general, like they don't feel like putting in any effort into studying, and you just have to accept that, which sometimes means that you have to be willing to, you know, fail them, let them go. It's not for them. It is not something that they should be actually doing. They are effectively, and I don't mean it in a negative way, they are effectively wasting their time. They should be doing something completely different, and they should be maybe studying something else. This is not for them. And if you are stuck in a program, studying something that you don't enjoy, that you don't find interesting, it's kind of like being stuck in a job that you pretty much hate. So yeah, the explanation was very, very long, and the answer is simple, in my opinion. As much as you can, motivate them, but try to influence their intrinsic motivation. If you can't, there are limits to what you can do, and you have to just deal with it. So I hope that answers the question. It was a very, very long and convoluted answer, but you know, you can always chat with me, you can always comment again. Anyway, see you in the next video. Bye bye.